right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Digital Manufacturing Talk. My name is Tyler Fenhouse. I'm the marketing manager for Symphony AI Industrial. We've got a great informational talk lined up for you today, labeled Mom 360, Hybrid Deployment Models for Enterprise Mom, Option, Risk, and Reward. As you may know, Symphony AI Industrial is a leader in industrial AI solutions in digital manufacturing, plant performance, optimization, and connected worker. Symphony AI Industrial is a Symphony AI vertical. There are several Symphony AI verticals. You can see them there on your screen. And we are one of the largest, if not the largest, enterprise AI companies with more than 1,600 customers and 3,000 employees. You will be muted throughout the presentation, but we still want your questions. At the end of the presentation, Chris Rickey, our presenter today, will take all of your questions right here live. So make sure throughout the presentation, you're typing those questions in the chat, and we will answer them at the end. Also be on the lookout for poll questions that Chris will be asking you, which will kind of guide his presentation today. So be on the lookout for that. All right, Chris has got a lot to cover, so I'm going to hand it off to him, and we're going to get this talk started. Chris, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. So, as Tyler mentioned, I am Chris Rickey. I'm the product manager for our Mom 360 suite of products here at Symphony AI Industrial. I've got more than 25 years in the Mom and MES space in a variety of industries, including med device, automotive, electronic assembly, CPG, pharmaceuticals. I live up here in New Hampshire with my family. You can see my wife and daughter there. So let's go ahead and get started. And you maybe notice the blur of my dog walking around me as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So we were talking about bear with me. So we were talking about architectural approaches to Mom in an enterprise scenario, right? And what I'm thinking about here specifically is on-prem solutions versus cloud-based solutions. And so what I wanted to look at is how some of these things, what are some of the risk and rewards that we can look at by having maybe a hybrid deployment model. Right now, from a architectural approach, cloud obviously is at the top of everyone's mind. We're going in that direction with a lot of different types of scenarios. If you think about what we have here within Symphony, Symphony Industrial, for example, we have a variety of technologies and tools that have come through acquisition, and some of those are very focused on-prem solutions. Some of those are very focused on cloud-based solutions. And so even within our own technology stack at Industrial, we kind of cover the gamut. And there's within manufacturing, I think probably on-premise solutions are probably still very typical and very prevalent. I think a lot of manufacturers are still a little bit hesitant to put operations out onto the cloud. But they are doing things like probably maybe Microsoft Office or maybe Google Office are running out on the cloud, and maybe some ERPs and things like that. So let's talk about what we can do with some of these things today, and see what we can what some of those benefits might be. All right. So first of all, on-prem, why would you still consider on-premises at this point? And it really comes down to the first two and the bullet points I have here are really the kind of the critical things in my mind, right? The first one, low latency. When we're dealing with an MES-based solution, a MOM solution, there's almost always going to be some level of automation integration down to those IoT devices, those PLCs. And a PLC does not like to wait around for information. If a PLC needs some information about how to do setup for a particular operation, it needs to know it pretty quickly. And so we want that low latency, quick access to that real-time data between the MES and the automation system. High availability is another one, right? If you look at MES systems, they're usually mission critical systems that your plant has to have in order to do production. And you don't want a network outage to take that system down. I've seen other, we have competitors out in the space that do have, cloud-based, fully cloud-based MES solutions. And they're constantly, if you've looked at some of those, they'll have outage windows, on Sunday nights between maybe midnight and 8 a.m. where they need to do upgrades or migrations or whatever. And if you're running a 24/7 manufacturing facility, you can't have just 8 hours of outage at your vendor's discretion. So high availability is another good reason that a lot of customers, a lot of people still look at on-prem solutions as valid. I mean, there's other reasons there too, and I won't go through all of these, but hopefully they make some sense. Those first two in my mind are really the two critical ones. I guess the last one I'll mention there is that customization and control, right? If you are dealing with a true cloud-based solution, and again, if you look at some of our competitors that have a true SaaS-based multi-tenant cloud solution, your opportunities for customization and controlling of that system is pretty much zero, right? If you're dealing with a SaaS-based solution, you may have changes that you want to make to the system, and you can request your vendor to do that. But whether they do it or not, that's going to go to a backlog, and they've got maybe several other customers using that same system, and so you got to work it into all of those priorities as well. So I think the ability to customize an on-prem solution is a much better potential. So, but why would you consider the cloud, right? I mean, obviously that's the direction that a lot of things are heading right now. And manufacturing is not really any different in that regard, right? So scalability, and again, I've kind of tried to order these. Scalability and global access are kind of the two biggies in my mind. Scalability in terms of, if you want to do, manufacturing can generate a lot of data. If you think about historian type data where you're collecting, possibly thousands of data points per minute, from your process historian, from your automation into your process historian, or you're running your tire company and you're making 100,000 tires per day. There's just a lot of data, and so the web or the cloud basically gives you the ability to scale up to handle that kind of volume fairly easily, without having to purchase additional hardware and go through the installation process on site. Global access is another good one, right? If you're dealing with you're an enterprise organization with maybe 100 or more sites and factories around the world, that's a lot of different environments to have to deal with, and if you want to start doing cross-plant reporting, that can be very difficult if all you have is on-prem solutions. So having global access and being able to kind of do that cross-plant reporting and consolidation of information is critical, I think. Innovation analytics is also critical, right? The cloud is basically your first step to big data and AI, machine learning models, and so by getting all that out to the cloud, it greatly increases the number of tools and compute power that you have available to do that type of high-end analytics. Reducing maintenance, right? If in a previous life, I was working with a customer that was looking to deploy an MES solution, and the amount of hardware that they were going to have to purchase or lease for the factory was actually more. It actually cost more for the hardware than it was for the software licenses and the configuration to set it all up. They were looking at, I think it was 14 different virtual machines ranging, from maybe 4 gigs to 32 gigs per image. And it was looking at, several $100,000 worth of hardware just to run the MES. And if you start multiplying that by, for every factory, it can greatly, number one, be just a huge investment in terms of hardware, but now you also need IT staff to maintain that. You obviously need, good procedures for doing backups and all that stuff. So pushing that stuff off to the cloud can greatly reduce a lot of those things. So here's our first pro question, right? What are you guys doing? And this is primarily from from the manufacturing perspective, right? But what are you guys doing with the cloud right now? So maybe nothing, right? Maybe everything you have is currently on-prem. Maybe it's just those Office applications. Maybe it's Office and some enterprise apps like ERP. Maybe you have some HR stuff out there, but no manufacturing stuff. Maybe you have some manufacturing stuff like your maintenance systems, maybe your PLM systems, but nothing really related specifically to execution on the floor. Maybe you have everything out there, right? Maybe you do have those manufacturing apps, but you still keep that automation connectivity locally and do some kind of IoT gateway to get that information out to the cloud. Or maybe everything, right? You're all in, like 100% cloud all the way.
All right, looks like about half the room has voted. Go ahead and get those votes in. I'm not sure if it's popping up in the audience's screen or if it's in the chat, but if you haven't voted yet, it may be in the chat. Go ahead and click to vote. I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds. All right, so I'm going to close the poll here. So it looks like 0% nobody voted for nothing, just Office 13%, 50% Office and some enterprise apps, and 25% all those, but also CMS, CMMS, PLM, and a few non-execution manufacturing apps, and then 13% everything, all in. Back to you.
Wow, that's interesting, right? The 50% does not surprise me at all. The 13% of just Office and then Office and ERP at about 63% or so does not surprise me. And then 25% of getting some of that stuff out there doesn't surprise me. I think the 13% does kind of surprise me that you're all in. I would love to understand some of those use cases better. I think I can probably imagine what some of those use cases are like, and maybe we can talk about some of that stuff as well. So awesome. Let's keep going. Okay, so I did mention the edge, right? So and I'm not going to say too much about the edge, right? Because in my mind, the edge is kind of that layer below MES and MOM, right? That's where we're doing that direct connectivity to those machines and those devices and sensors. There's great use cases for edge, right? And MOM does not eliminate those use cases, right? They would work in conjunction with, but they're a little bit different targets, right? The people responsible for doing edge level stuff is probably more your automation guys. We may do some small machine learning model execution down at the edge, where you have small amount compute. Maybe it's running on a PLC, or maybe it's running in like a Raspberry Pi device or something even, right? So I would expect an MES system to interact with the edge, the way I'm defining it here, but it's going to be more of a traditional IoT integration, PLC automation integration approach to the edge. So that gets us to hybrid, right? So what do I mean by hybrid? So obviously, or maybe not obvious, but when I talk about hybrid, I mean trying to leverage the benefits of the on-prem solution, but also combine that with the benefits of what we get from the cloud. So an example might be where you have some of those core applications out on the floor. But then you do like a cloud-based storage or backup, right? So that's an example. That's not exactly how I want to approach it from a MOM perspective. We'll look at what I mean by from a MOM perspective. But really, the goal with hybrid is to, again, take advantage of the best of both worlds, get what we can from the cloud and take what we need from from on premises. So how do we do that, right? So when we looked at MOM 360, we we have taken a hybrid approach to the total architecture. I say, we can deploy all of this on-prem, right? So there are still customers that that may be hesitant to do stuff on the cloud from a manufacturing perspective, and that's okay. We can still cover you guys. We can put all of this on-prem. There's no cloud requirement for us. But for those of you that are ready to start making use of the cloud, and whether it's public cloud or private cloud, we can do that, right? Really, when we look at these two different components of MOM, what we call our system of intelligence and our system of process. The system of intelligence is the piece that I would expect to run in the cloud. Now, this may be, maybe a true public cloud, so running it out on Azure, making use of native Azure services, for example, or AWS. Or it may be running in a private cloud. So if you have your own Azure tenant already, you could put it in there. Or even more private, like if you have a central data server farm, at corporate headquarters, where you maintain all that equipment yourself, but you centralize that. That is a possibility as well. So when I look at that system of intelligence, that's really our centralized component, regardless of what the infrastructure is you end up wanting to run that on. But the goal there is to basically do the things that are they're important, and they're common, but they're not mission critical, right? So doing things like enterprise connectivity to your ERP system for getting orders and inventory, integrating to your PLM system or wherever you may store your bills of material, your recipes, your routes, and then providing that system of record, so that long-term data archive, the historical data for doing reporting and analytics. That's our system of intelligence. And so then our system of process is what I would expect to be installed on premises. Again, we could put the system of process in the cloud as well if you trust that connection to your cloud, and your latency is not an issue, right? But typically the system of process is probably going to be installed at the plant. But this is a very small footprint, component. So it may be, running as on a very small server. And what it does is it connects back to that system of intelligence and exchanges information as necessary. And it's designed to be ran disconnected. So if we do lose that connection from the plant to the corporate install or to the cloud, we have enough information and that system of process to continue executing for, maybe some number of hours or days, just depending upon, your level of risk aversion. And so that system of process basically handles those things that we need from an on-premises solution, right? We got that low latency connections to our IoT devices. This is also where we do our kind of our low code and composability. And what I mean by that is, what we do up in our system of intelligence is probably fairly typical and fairly common. Managing orders is usually not too different from one type of plant to another. But how we actually execute those orders, on the plant floor at a given work center for a given operation may vary, right? And so we put that composability into the hands of the plant, so they can build out that exact kind of workflow and process that needs to happen within the work cell and the operation itself. And so we hope that this, as I said, kind of takes advantage of the best of both worlds. It gives us that high compute, kind of low cost, cloud-based solution for keeping all of our data and doing our typical management and our connections to the enterprise, right? So we only have to do that one time to connect to our ERP systems or our PLMs. And then we can focus on what we need to do on the on-prem system and what the customer needs to do for their specific process. And connect their specific equipment. So let's look at our second poll question here. So the question is, given what you guys have right now and what you're currently using for the cloud, how comfortable are you with pushing more to the cloud, right? So those of you guys that are 13% all in, I assume your answer is going to be yes, we completely trust the cloud, right? But for the rest of you guys, are you comfortable doing planning, reporting, maybe scheduling, those kind of things out on the cloud, maybe long-term data archiving, kind of like we're describing, but not quite ready to do execution out there? Or maybe maybe the alternative is the stuff that you guys are doing is so um, so specific and so critical that you can't tolerate any kind of an outage for any of your manufacturing systems, so you want to do everything local.
All right, looks like about half the room has responded. Go ahead and get those answers in, and I will share the results here in a couple more seconds. Couple more people just waiting on. All right, last chance. Okay, so 13% completely trust the cloud, 63% yes for planning and reporting, 25% no, my operations are too critical. Back to you.
Interesting. So I guess that's good news, right? So if you guys are looking for a mom solution, those of you that completely trust the cloud, we can actually absolutely help you guys out, because we can push all of this stuff into the cloud as necessary. For the majority, which is kind of what I suspected, right? Those kind of low critical, low priority planning, reporting, data archive, 50 or 60% of you guys said that makes perfect sense, right? And again, that's kind of our target from our hybrid architecture, right? And then the rest of you guys that are concerned, everything's too critical, we need to have it all local. Again, absolutely, mom we can pull all that stuff down and take care of you guys as well. So hopefully that something that you guys can consider. All right, let's move on here. So what are some of these benefits, right? So we've talked about some of this stuff already, but hopefully hopefully this kind of makes sense, right? So cost efficiency, right? We take advantage of each one of those pieces that that makes sense, right? So big data, big compute, let's centralize that and not have to duplicate infrastructure. That's a great way to push that stuff off to the cloud, but then keep things small and light and low maintenance. Bring those things down to on-prem, so we kind of get the best of both of those things. Data security is one of those things. We talked a little bit about it, but keeping those on-prem processes, that's often where customers see a lot of their IP, is in the specifically how how you do those individual operations. So the fact that when you make cookies, you go through a mixing and a forming and a baking operation, that's not a secret. But maybe the how that mix actually happens is where the secret sauce happens. So you can keep that local. Scalability, again, being able to and this kind of goes to the cost efficiency piece, right? Being able to take advantage of adding additional capacity when you need it on the cloud, and then reducing it back when you don't, makes it much easier. Excuse me. And then disaster recovery, performance optimization, those things, by keeping that on-prem piece small and light, if it were to go down, you can get that back up and running very quickly, sync that back up to the cloud very quickly. So hopefully these benefits make sense. But what are the risks, right? So the biggest risk really is with this flexibility, there does come some complexity, right? And one of the things, security may be part of that, right? Because we do have this component that runs out in the cloud. We do have this component that runs on-prem. They obviously have to communicate back and forth. So that means that there has to be some kind of a pipe open between those. The providers are working, this is critical to cloud providers, so they are working towards making cloud solutions much more secure. One of the ways that we can mitigate that is putting a VPN in place, so that when that that on-prem piece connects back. It does that through a VPN, which is going to get you encryption. IAM is another way to help make sure that the people that need to be doing these things or are doing these things are in the right roles. Data integration is also introduces some of that complexity. So you have information that comes from your cloud component. You have pieces that are on the on-prem component. And trying to keep those things synchronized can be tricky, especially if you do have an outage and those things aren't able to communicate in real or near real time. And the way we do this is we essentially do it through like a token passing approach where depending upon the state of the data, either the cloud component or the on-prem component owns it. And then depending upon which side owns it, the other side has to ask permission to do things with it. So that's the approach that we're taking, and it seems to be working pretty well. There's probably some compliance risk as well. I kind of separate these out because from my perspective, they're not as critical on a manufacturing. If you look at GDPR, for example, that's usually about personal information, and usually manufacturing systems don't store personal information outside of a username. So I don't necessarily see compliance risk in general as a problem for most manufacturing. If you get into some aerospace and defense, or if you get into some life sciences, there's other compliance requirements, but those can be addressed on a more ad hoc basis. So with that, what I would like to do is pop over and to show you guys around a little bit about what this might look like from a Mom 360 perspective. And then we can address some questions. So let me click over here to, all right. So this is probably going to time out. Let me just go ahead and see if it times out on me. Oh, no, good. All right, so basically what we're looking at here is I've got two different windows open here. I've got my the cloud-based or the centralized component is this window that we see here. And a couple things that you'll notice is we try to target the type of users that we're dealing with. So people that are those user roles that are working in the centralized component, they're typically going to be maybe people from from the corporate headquarters, or it may be people working in the front office of the plant. And so they're probably typically going to be running these things or this system on a typical laptop or a typical workstation where they got a mouse and a keyboard and whatnot, right? And so it's much more like a front-end office type solution in that regard. So we can see here some orders that have maybe come out of our ERP system in various states. If we look at this one here, for example, we can see this production orders for a certain material, for a certain quantity. It's already, we already know where we intend to produce this at the Wilmington site on a certain production line. We do need to decorate it with some manufacturing information. So this may or may not be coming from my ERP system. So I can provide that here, say that we're going to use this ethanol solvent recipe, which now allows me to be able to release that order. And then I can start batching that up into maybe smaller sub quantities. In this case, I'll just take the full quantity of 1,000 liters and produce that batch. So we'll get that released. And that now basically goes down to the plant floor, down to our on-prem solution to actually be executed. So if we change our hats here and switch over, this is the on-prem solution. So now we're playing the role of an operator. So a little bit different look and feel. This is more intended to be running on a like a touchscreen machine, or maybe in a heavily gloved environment. So we try to have bigger buttons and less dependence upon the mouse. And so if we do a refresh here, we should see that that new order show up here. Might take it a few minutes here for it to synchronize. We can see the other order that I created earlier today is already there in a release state. And there's the one that we just released, order number 2. If I come in here, I can see, that I need to get this particular order running. And so this is where our operators would start working, right? And so by getting this job started, he's now going to, walk through his process of whatever it is that he needs to do with this premix operation of, productions or consumptions or data collections or whatever it may be. But we're already, sending this information back to our centralized component. So if we were to come back over here and do a refresh over here, we can see that that order now is in a process state. And if we break it out and look at all of those jobs, we can see that that 157600 job is currently in process. We can see when it started. So we're keeping that that system of record updated in near real time, so that we can do those analytics and reporting as necessary. So so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how these two components to MOM, our cloud-based solution and our edge-based solution can work together, and kind of what it might look like from an operator's perspective. So with that, I'll go back to our presentation here. If you guys are interested in learning more about MOM and how we can help solve some of these problems for you guys, regardless of your approach, whether you want to do our hybrid approach of some in the cloud and some on-prem, or if you want to go all cloud or all on-prem, we can do either one of those. I encourage you to reach out to Mark Besser, our VP of Customer Success, and we can certainly have that conversation.